Welcome to TheWolverine.com pregame tailgate show. I am Michael Spath here with my colleague John Bortz. We are outside of the big house on the eve of the Michigan-Indiana game. Looking at this game, and a week ago we were out here, I was talking to Chris Ballas, and we were talking about some of the great games in Michigan-Penn State history. And even though Michigan and Indiana have played far more often than those two teams, there's not quite that history. There's not quite those great games outside of the ones that stand out, 1979 and a couple years ago, 2010.
That's a pretty dramatic difference. I mean, 16, now 17 games in the Penn State series, and you think about all the excitement and thrills you've had in that one. Indiana, different story. I mean, most of the time, what is it? It's waiting around till basketball season starts. But, you talk to Jerry Hanlon, and he'll say, oh, believe me, you remember the ones that you lose, like 1987. But the fact is, I mean, there's been that one loss to Indiana since 1967, I believe. And so you just kind of start to take it for granted. It's getting to be a different story now, though. I mean, I think Kevin Wilson has really injected a lot into this rivalry so that you have to pay more attention. You can't check this off as an automatic. I mean, I think you saw that last week up at Michigan State. Boom, they score right out of the box. And everybody's looking, hey, Indiana could certainly move the ball and score. So, although historically, I mean, this has just been check it off and move on, it's not that way right now.
Right, absolutely. This could be one of those great games that they have not had in this series. We could be, come Saturday night, we could be talking about a one-score game and just how much excitement there was, how much offense there was. I think we can count on that. There's going to be offense. Even though Michigan has struggles with the offensive line right now running the football, which we'll talk about in a little bit, they are still putting points on the board. To their credit, to the play of Devin Gardner, to some big play wide receivers, Indiana can score. So there's a chance that this one is going to be ones that maybe it's not 67-65 triple overtime against Illinois.
Please.
But it could be a very high-scoring game where the first team to 40 wins.
I agree. I think, Michigan, you got a team that's scoring 39 points a game. I don't think they'll be far off from that in this game because it's just going to be the kind of tempo, kind of pace game that it will be. And Indiana doesn't really stop people. I mean, that's. But on the other hand, they are going to score. Indiana is going to score in this game. I just don't see. I think Michigan brings a higher level of defense to the table than certainly a lot of people that Indiana has faced. And yet you just dial it back a week ago and Indiana puts 28 on the board against Michigan State, which has had the best defense in the country statistically. So, I do see it as being a kind of an up-and-down game, a game where Michigan will be looking to maybe do what they did against Notre Dame, for instance. You give up a lot of yards and you make them go the long field. You try to turn potential touchdowns into field goals and go from there. And, win a game in the 30s, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at this game, I think the other thing to take into consideration is that Michigan needs this one. It's Indiana, but it's a big game. You just lost a game to Penn State. You need to get back on the winning track. I know a lot of people are saying, well, I won't have a bitter taste wiped out of my mouth until we play Michigan State, and if Michigan beats Michigan State. But they need to have so many issues that they need to get fixed that this is not going to be a wasted game. This is a game that they have to win, and they have to get a lot of those things to start to come together before they go into the bye.
You want to talk about bad taste? You lose this one, and all of a sudden you're sitting on 2 weeks of eating dead crow soaked in vinegar. I mean, it's bad. It would be a bad thing, a real downward spiral for this team if it loses in the way it did against Penn State, and that just hurt. I mean, you have to look at it and understand that this is a game that Michigan had in its grasp a number of times, and to lose a 10-point lead in the last several minutes of regulation and then have things go the way that they did in the overtimes, it's just a crusher, and you have to rebound strongly. If this one slipped away, they'd have to go in and sit on that whole 2-week span into Michigan State, and I think it would involve confidence and a loss thereof. I mean, it's just a hugely important game for Michigan, not only to technically correct some of the things that have gone wrong, but also to rebuild some of that confidence.
Absolutely. Well, we'll talk a little bit about Indiana specifically in the next segment. This is the Wolverine.com pregame tailgate show. Welcome back to the Wolverine.com tailgate pregame show. I'm now joined by Andy Reid, who's going to talk a little about Indiana's no-huddle, up-tempo offense. We saw this a week ago against Michigan State. Maybe that was the first chance for a lot of Michigan fans to see that game. And they have a play go, and they go immediately up to the line of scrimmage. Andy, what strikes you about this Indiana up-tempo offense that makes it difficult for defenses?
Well, it's a big stat in college football right now is plays per game. How many can you squeeze in there? Michigan is on the low end of that right now, but Indiana is one of those teams, along with Oregon and Baylor and Cal, that are getting to the line of scrimmage and doing as much as they can and getting as many opportunities as they can every game. And it does make it hard on the defense. You saw it last week against Penn State. They hurried up a little bit, at times messed with tempo in certain areas, and there were times where Michigan was just not ready for it. There was one specifically, nobody was down. The linemen were kind of just up looking at each other. There was 13 guys on the field. They just were not prepared for that, and it does make a big difference with what Greg Madison is going to want to do, because as he's proven all year, he loves rotation. And you saw it last game specifically at the Sam linebacker spot they were in. Got all those guys in as much as possible, but they've been doing that in the front seven all year. And if Indiana's hurrying up, then they are not going to have that opportunity to do that. Guys are going to have to play longer stretches and kind of tough it out. The thing Michigan State did very well was get off the field on third downs, and that definitely helps with your defense when you're facing an up-tempo offense. I think they were 8 of 18.
Indiana was 8 of 18
on third down.
So State was 10 of 18 in defense.
Yeah. So what that does is it just shortens drives, and you can kind of get back to the sideline, reassess, and get more guys in there on the next drive if you want to.
Well, I think it was interesting. I mean, Jake Ryan said it earlier this week, 3 plays and out. I mean, he played 3 plays, then Cam Gordon came in. 3 plays, Brendan Byard came in. Chris Wormley was saying the same thing as strong side defensive end. That's how they've been using these guys in the front seven so far.
You just can't do that against an offense like
you
this.
Can't do that. I mean, when you look at it, Indiana's coming to the line of scrimmage now. If they see Michigan trying to sub someone out, what they're just going to do is they're just going to go up to the line of scrimmage and hike the ball. So I mean, it makes it really difficult. Chris Wormley talked about it. If we're on the wrong hash, if I'm on the far hash, my sideline is on the other side for me. I'm not going to get off the field. I know that I have to keep on going and going and going. And the question is not only does that exhaust you, but does it confuse the defense when one was thinking, okay, it's been my 3 plays, my 4 plays, I need to get off. What is that mentality like if you're trying to get off and then you have to be still on the field?
Well, Brady Hoke talked specifically about the one play against Penn State where they were really caught off guard, and they were trying to match up their personnel with the guys Penn State was bringing in, and you can't do that. You just have to go. Everybody has to know their assignment in every situation and just go. You can't think about it. You can't try to sub guys in because they're bringing Shane Wynn or something like that. You just have to go.
Well, the other interesting thing defensively for this game for Michigan is obviously the way that Indiana spreads his team out and runs his up-tempo offense. You're not going to be able to change personnel in terms of you want to play a 4-3 now, or you want to play a 3-3-5, or they're going to have to probably stick with one system. It's most likely going to be 3 down linemen with Jake Ryan or one of the Sam linebackers being that 4th defensive lineman, and then 5 defensive backs. Now the question is right now Michigan's pretty well established that it's 2 starting safeties, it's 2 starting cornerbacks. Who is the 5th cornerback, that nickelback this week? Channing Stribling was the guy we saw late in the game, but he had the 2 passes that got over his head. Is he the guy, or is it Courtney Avery this week?
I think it's been Courtney Avery since he came back from injury, and I don't see any reason why they would switch now. I mean, they were in just max protect there at the end of the game, and they got Channing in there. I like what Courtney Avery does. He's a veteran guy. He knows the defense, and I think he's going to give you the best opportunity to win. But Stribling is athletic. He's tall. He just doesn't have the experience yet, so he'll continue to get better. I really like him. I think he's going to be a promising cornerback here in the future. But right now, I think you stick with your guy in Avery.
Okay. We'll come back on the Wolverine.com tailgate. We're actually going to talk a little bit of basketball in the next segment, and then a little bit of hockey before we jump back into football.
Welcome back to the Wolverine.com tailgate show. I'm John Borton here with Andy Reid, and we want to move away from football just for a minute and talk a little bit of basketball because it's coming, Andy. It's mid-October, and we're already hearing a lot about the basketball team, ranked 9th in the preseason poll, and a team that has all kinds of promise and all kinds of excitement about it, given what happened last year.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan's obviously a basketball school now, right?
It's working that way.
Yeah. I think obviously they're going to have holes to fill with Trey and Tim gone, but I really like what's coming in. Derek Walton was one of the first recruits that I really followed his career when I got this job. The first couple times I saw him, his junior year of school, I wasn't super impressed. I just could see the skill and everything, but nothing he did really wowed me. But every time I went and saw him, he got a little bit better until that last summer. He just was incredible. I think obviously one of, if not the best point guard in that class, and I think he's going to be able to fill that hole fine. He's not Trey Burke. You can't hope that he is, because he's a once in a generation player, but I think he's going to do just fine.
Well, in some ways, I mean, he's going to be what this team needs, even though he's not as much like Trey Burke, because Derek Walton is a guy that's going to feed these other people and make them really happy. Trey Burke was an excellent point guard, but more of a shooting point guard, whereas Derek Walton can distribute and get the ball in the hands of people, and Michigan's got a lot of people that can score, obviously, between Mitch McGary and Nick Stauskas, and lots of guys that can put it in the hole. They are going to love Derek Walton in that the ball is going to be finding its way their way. Derek Walton is one of the two guys that gave fans a little bit of a scare leading up to this season, or even this fall camp, in that he was in a boot in the summertime. He had a little tweak to a lower extremity, and but I think he's out of that now. He's coming along. He should be ready for practice. The other one, however, is one that we're still hearing about, and that is Mitch McGary with some back issues.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's going to be something that's cleared up by game time. When we talked to Beeline about it, he was pretty optimistic that he was going to get back in the fold, but the last we saw, he wasn't doing anything in practice. He was just kind of being a coach to guys like Mark Donnell, a freshman who needs it right now. So that's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on.
But here's the difference. Even you have a guy with a broken leg. Okay, it's set, it heals, it's done. Back is not always like that, and so that'll be that could be an ongoing concern. He'll get the highest level of treatment. They won't force him back in before it's time, but backs and like almost like a foot injury with a football player, a stress fracture. That's one of those things where it's just kind of iffy, and you really have to keep an eye on it. What are you? Tell me this: as you look at Michigan and its present configuration basketball-wise, what are the things that you think are going to take a step forward from last year? Everybody talks about they won't be the same team without Trey Burke and Tim Hardaway. You lose that kind of a backcourt. But when you talk about, okay, but they could be better in some ways because of.
I think the number one is Glenn Robinson. I think his role on this team is going to increase even more because of the things you mentioned earlier. This is going to be more of a distributing team and finding guys with an opportunity to score. So I think his role on this team is going to be much more important, and I think he's going to rise to the challenge. He went a little quiet at times last year, but I think that's going to be fixed. I'm also excited to see what happens with Zach Irvin.
I think there can be a lot of combinations for these guys.
Yeah.
And that Beeline loves that versatility, and he has it in spades with this team. What I like and what I look at is some of the physical development over the summer. You've got a Nick Stauskas putting on 15 pounds and getting a little bit more rugged, which he needs to do.
He looks like a man. Karis LeVert has arms and not just broomsticks anymore. Like they all look like they really put in work this summer.
Yeah, Karis LeVert is. I mean, it makes me think of Maceo Basson, who never really did put on that extra weight. I mean, he just always stayed kind of spindly. But LeVert has got so many physical skills, and you just think about the guys that just naturally mature and take a step forward. So they're saying hi to us from Indiana. Well, hello there. But I just think that Michigan fans have a lot to be excited for about this basketball team. it's not just physical development. It's also the way that these guys have matured. I mean, to think that you had a roster that was built largely around some freshman talent, with Stauskas, with McGarry, with Robinson, and all those guys went all the way to that championship game. That, I think, is invaluable.
Absolutely. And I think they're all going to take a step up this year. Hopefully McGarry's injury kind of fixes itself, and I'm very interested to see if he can continue that postseason run this year. Because if he does, then just watch out.
Before we wrap it up, biggest concern has got to be the backcourt and seeing that develop going forward. I think, Spike Albrecht gives you some insurance there, which is great because he was operating at a high level at the end of last year. But you do have Derek Walton, who I think everybody expects to come along and really play a significant role.
Yeah, I agree. That is the place to look, losing two guys that are playing NBA minutes right now. Obviously, Bird is hurt, but he would be otherwise. But so that's obviously a big concern. But I'm not too worried about it. I really like the talent they have coming in. And it's going to take some time and some growing pains to get those guys in there, but I'm optimistic.
It's just around the corner, and we'll definitely be bringing it all to you on TheWolverine.com.
Back and talking a little bit about Michigan hockey. The Michigan hockey team is in New Hampshire this weekend, taking on the Wildcats. And last weekend we talked a week ago before the Penn State game about their big win over Boston College. They also went on the road and beat RIT 7-4 in a game that they led 4-0. They actually gave up 4 consecutive goals. And right before the end of the second period, they got back on the board, took a 5-4 lead, and kind of finished off the Tigers in the third period. And a really impressive win for such a young team right now, because when you look at a year ago, we talked about this a lot this week with some of their captains. When you look at a year ago, that was a game that they probably would have lost because they would have lost confidence. They would have started questioning their goaltending, questioning their defense. The scorers would have felt the weight of the world on their shoulders to outscore RIT. And instead, Mac Bennett, who's Michigan's senior captain this season, he said that after the second period, when they're up 5-4 and the game had kind of been getting away from him, he said, there was not any doubt in anybody's mind that we were going to win that game. We had so much confidence. This team is just stronger. There's better chemistry, better cohesion. People like each other. They have a solid goalie in Steve Racine that's now a sophomore and has proven himself. So there's no worries about what's going to happen if they let the puck behind them. So there's a lot of things about this young Michigan hockey team. It features 10 freshmen. Going forward here, I think what we're looking at is potential for a really strong first half of the season. After this weekend against New Hampshire, they have Boston University next Friday at Yost Ice Arena, and then UMass Lowell next Saturday at Yost Ice Arena, and then some other great games. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and certainly they're off to a much better start than they were a year ago. We're back with the TheWolverine.com Tailgate Show in our final segment here, and looking at this Michigan game. Guys, for each of you, a key to the game for Michigan today, what do they need to do to make sure that they come out on top?
My number one that I want to look at is Michigan's running game. We all know what happened at Penn State with 28 yards and 30 total carries. This is probably the worst rushing defense they're going to face all year. They are 110th nationally, 216 yards against per game. Michigan State is an offense that's been struggling. They went over for over 250 on the ground against these guys. Navy, which is a running team, went for almost 450 yards on the ground. So this is the key. If Michigan, just to move forward, cannot establish the line of scrimmage, can't get a push, and is giving up tackles for loss in this game, then you go from a concern to kind of panic mode about the offensive line and the run game.
John, if they don't get the thing going with all week, Brady Hogan has said, listen, we are going to stick to the I formation. We are going to be a power run team. We're not going to make Devin Gardner carry the ball 24 times like he did against Penn State. But if that first half comes and goes and the running backs have 40 yards on 15 or 20 carries, do you think they say, okay, we got to do to win, we're going to use Devin Gardner this way?
Well, I think they'll use him if they have to, but you don't have to use him necessarily running the ball 24 times to achieve a change-up in what you're doing to get things going. I mean, yes, they did it at Penn State, but also you just look at throwing on earlier downs. I mean, you look at throwing on more on first down and loosening teams up, backing them off. If you can't establish the run right away, start throwing the ball, loosen them up, back them off, make it such that you find creative ways to move the football. I think there's no doubt that Michigan can do some things through the passing game that creates running opportunities, and the biggest of those is Devin drops back, to throw, everybody backs off, nobody's open, and he takes off. Those are his very best running opportunities, and he makes things out of those and can also, kind of control the situation more, because then when he takes off, it's not a designed run, and you're not finding a stacked defense against it. He's in the open field, he can slide, he can get out of bounds, which he's pretty good at doing. So I really look at those things, but to me, it comes back to that biggest thing of all, and that is not turning the football over. Akron, UConn, Penn State all stayed in the football game, and Penn State actually ended up winning it, but they all stayed in it and got leads at one point because Michigan didn't keep control of the football.
Yeah, when you look, last week Penn State scored 14 points off of 3 Devin Gardner turnovers, 2 interceptions, and a fumble. For as many things that had happened in that game, how much of a different game would it have been before you got to that point if you don't give those easy points away? And I think when you look at, as you said, Akron and Connecticut, and even Notre Dame at the end of the game, Michigan has had 2 blowouts, and one of them comes with the fact that they didn't turn the ball over at all. The other one comes against Central Michigan. They have to do a better job holding on to the football, not giving Indiana, because this is an Indiana team that we talked about earlier that can score points. If you're giving their defense points, or you're giving their offense 20 yards to work with instead of having to go 80 yards, that changes the dynamic completely for this game.
No short fields. That's no instant points like you've given away, and no short fields. That's the other element to this, because on the defensive side, I think Michigan has to make Indiana go the long way, and not going the long way like it went in those opening minutes against Michigan State, where boom, the run breaks up the middle and it's a sprint to the end zone. I think it very well could be a Notre Dame type of situation. I know people don't like bend but not break necessarily, but you might be looking at some of that. Make them work their way down field and try to force the turnover, try to force the big mistake.
Yeah. Indiana is going to score points. They're going to get yards, especially in the passing game. And it doesn't mean that Michigan's secondary is awful if they come out slinging the ball. That's just what they want to do. And Kevin Wilson is a really good offensive coach. He really knows what he's doing over there. So yeah, you're best at just keeping that umbrella, keeping everything in front of you, not giving up the big one, and making them work for it. Absolutely.
Well, I wanted to ask, one of the things for Michigan too is they've got this now emerging passing game with Devin Funchess rising up, and we talked all week about how Devin Funchess at 6'4", 235 pounds is a mismatch no matter where he lines up. He's a mismatch against linebackers because he's faster than them. He's a mismatch against safeties because he's bigger, stronger, and almost faster than them. Now we saw him get behind a cornerback in that Penn State game for a couple long touchdown runs, or a couple long touchdown receptions. So we know that he can actually outrun a cornerback if he needs to, and he has the size over him. And I know that Andy, last week we looked at Allen Robinson and how Michigan could bracket combo cover him. But if you try to bracket Devin Funchess, and part of that important part is jamming him at the line of scrimmage, doesn't he just blow past a cornerback that's trying to jam him at the line of scrimmage?
Maybe. he has the athleticism to do so. I don't know if he's there right now because he's still learning the position. He has been jammed a few times, and he's kind of disappeared in the past games. But that's okay. I think he's going to get better at that. The biggest thing, his emergence, has given this team is options. Because since that Notre Dame game, teams are just completely sold out on Gallen. They're just blanketing his side of the field, trying to limit him as much as possible. They can't do that anymore if they've got such a dangerous weapon on the other side of the field. So now you're kind of picking your poison, and either one of those guys is completely dangerous.
Well, John, at some point, if they get really crazy and they try to take both of them away, then it's going to open up the game for
a Jake Chesson or a Jake Butt. I think either of those are very legitimate targets, both younger guys developing, and you just can't double both of those guys.
Well, so if you're spending so much time worrying about those two guys, you're not going to be able to have 8 or 9 guys in the box. You're not going to be able to walk up safeties as State doing a lot in the second half. It's kind of clear that Michigan was not throwing the ball safeties up. They were selling out on that run. They're not Indiana. Future teams aren't going to be able to do that. I think that will help Michigan's run game situation as well.
Okay, guys, it sounds like there's a little bit of noise behind us, so we're gonna have to yell over the top of it. But predictions for the game against Indiana. Andy, you got Michigan winning or Michigan losing?
I have Michigan winning. I'm a little nervous about shootout because obviously Indiana's offense can get this team going. I don't know if I can trust Michigan's offense right now to match that if it gets kind of that shootout kind of thing. But I like Michigan's defense enough to limit Indiana's options offensively. I'm going to say something about like 35-24 Michigan.
I don't have Michigan holding Indiana to 24 in this game. I see it again a little bit more like that Notre Dame game, but I do see them limiting the touchdowns, the potential touchdowns enough, turning them into field goals, and I've got this one Michigan 38 and Indiana 30.
Okay, so another high-scoring game. And I probably have the highest-scoring game among the staff this week. I look at it and say, I think Michigan's going to score at will. We saw that a week ago with Michigan State. They put 42 points on this Indiana team, and this is a Michigan State team that, yes, is starting to find a little bit more offense, but is still not a prolific group, and certainly should not be able to score 42 points against another Big Ten team. I think that speaks more to Indiana's defense than it does to the Spartans' offense. And when you consider that, I think Michigan can score in the 40s this week. We'll probably get to 45 or so, and I think Indiana is going to have some big plays. I worry that there's going to be a Gardner turnover or two that is going to lead to some short fields. So I'm looking at this one, picking Michigan, but going 45-35. So that's what we have this week from TheWolverine.com. We'll see you next week.